Welcome to the Gentleman Project podcast. My name is Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Today with us, we have one of my longtime friends, Mr. Michael Haws. I've known Mike since college and have tons of mutual friends. I've always respected him and looked up to him, and he's a very real person. I love that about Mike. Been through some amazing things in his life. He's a way better golfer than me, even though he's not into it anymore as much. And has a son who is 3 now, you said.
Yeah, just turned 3.
Mike, thanks for being with us.
It's good to be here. Good morning. Happy Friday.
Thank you, sir. So talk to us a little bit about your boy and about your family makeup, and then we'll go from there.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Haws. I grew up here in Davis County, so just north of Salt Lake City, where we're at today. 5 boys, 1 girl. So we had Emily, my sister, the rose amongst all the thorns. Mm-hmm. And, I grew up in a family that was very typical of a Utah family, was affiliated with one of the predominant religions here, had a wonderful mother, father, just great role models in my life. And so I learned at a young age, the family roles. My dad, he was a disciplinarian. He was a caretaker and a provider. And my mother, she was a stay-at-home mom, and she provided us with love and kindness and, really a domesticated mom that was just always there for us. And so I had some wonderful examples, growing up. And so when you ask me, Cory, about my son, Maverick, there's a lot of feelings and emotions come up because I had some great models in my life. And for some reason, when I think about those models and where I'm at today with my son, I feel like I'm falling short in a lot of those areas. He's only 3 years old. I'm completely in love with Maverick. In fact, this morning we've watched 2 episodes of SpongeBob together. We watched Daniel the Tiger, and Maverick is really into wrestling right now. So at about 6:30 this morning, we were doing a little WWF wrestling there in the front room. So, he's my pride and joy and just the light of my world and my wife's world right now.
I love it. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. All parents don't have it figured out. It's the whole reason we have this podcast in the first place, is so that we can kind of learn from each other. It's funny, in the business world, we don't talk about it as much. Right? It's not like something you go to a business meeting and say, so how's your parenting going? We should. And that's why we have this podcast. So Mike, tell us a little bit about Red Barn and what you're doing there, because it's such a huge part of who you are in your life. Tell us about that a little bit, just to give the listener some context.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Red Barn Farms is located north here of Salt Lake City in a town called Farmington. And it's a town that I grew up in. I was born in 1976, so I'm close to turning 45 years old and, spent all my time up here in Farmington and up here in Davis County. I think it's important for the listeners to know that little red barn was built in the early 2000s because my family, we grew up kind of as wannabe farmers. We always had horses. We always had chickens, ducks. As I reminisce with my father about that, and those fond memories, that's where we learned how to work hard. That's where we got up each morning. And I remember breaking the ice so the horses could drink water. And I just remember thinking to myself, I guess, this is our way of life. So when my dad built this little red barn on the west side of Farmington back in 2000, I can hear my mom saying, Rich, what are you doing there on the west side of Farmington? What is this little red barn you're doing? What are you building down there? And his response at the time was, I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing. It just feels right. Fast forward to 2012, June 29th, 4 days from now, at 6:00 in the morning, I received a phone call from my father. The Davis County Sheriff Department was at my parents' house. My dad called me to tell me that they had found my little brother, Dustin Haws, dead in a hotel room in Salt Lake City, that he had died of a heroin overdose. So as you two can imagine, and the listeners, it shocked my family. I remember that morning. It was a Friday morning, not much different than this morning. I remember hitting my knees and just bawling. In fact, I was with you, Cory, later that day.
You were. I remember that vividly.
And you comforted me and took me in as a friend. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
So as you can imagine, losing a brother, losing a family member like that, we were shocked. We weren't ready for that. We were really faced with one of two options: continue in denial, because that's what we did as a family here in Utah, pretended like everything was great, or use this little red barn, the west side of Farmington, to shine a light on this stigma, on addiction, on these unhealthy behaviors. Because what we've learned over time, gentlemen, is that it's not about the drugs. It's not about the alcohol. It's everything else that leads up to that. And my family, we weren't healthy. We didn't have integrity. We didn't have honesty. We didn't have transparency. And so as a result, as young men growing up in this culture, we looked for different ways to cope. And some of those skills were unhealthy. And my little brother, Dustin, unfortunately, he fell into drugs and he got hooked on heroin, and it ultimately killed him. So as an older brother, I was active in my addiction at the time. In fact, 2 days after Dustin passed away, I ended up in a traffic accident on I-15 just before the Centerville off-ramp, rolled my car, obviously a DUI, woke up handcuffed to the hospital bed in the Davis Hospital with 2 police officers looking over me. 2 days before my brother died.
Before or after?
2 days before was in this accident, my brother died. We were in the middle of planning the funeral, all the arrangements and everything. And again, I ended up in the Davis County Jail. I remember calling my brother that day, David, my older brother, one of my best friends in the world, and said, "David, here I am again. I need your help." Like he'd done before, he came and bailed me out, and he's taking me out of the Davis County Jail. He started to make a turn down to Red Barn. I said, no. I can't do this, David. I can't do this right now. Give me some time, and then I'll go talk to Dad. He says, "No, Dad's waiting for you." I walked in the door of Red Barn. My dad was sitting there at the boardroom table, and with tears in his eyes, he looked at me and he says, "Michael," he said, "we just lost your little brother, Dustin. Are we going to lose you too?" That hit me so hard, because for the first time in my life, I had some clarity or just some awareness, or just not being so selfish. My dad looked at me and he said, "You have our full support. What is it that you need?" I mean, you guys need to know, I'd already been to rehab twice before. I'd been locked up over a dozen times. I hadn't been to prison yet, and I just about died. Not to mention my little brother just passed away. And so he looked at me, and when he said, "You have our support, whatever you need," that was a turning point for my dad and my relationship, because heretofore, he'd always forced me. "You're going to go do this. I know what's in your best interest. I'm your father." This time he took the approach where he said, "Michael, we care about you. You tell us what you need and we'll support you." And that was a huge paradigm shift for my dad and I, because now it was on me to go get the help that I needed to get and own it and fully engage into the process. So long story short, I went and got the help that I needed. And during this time, my dad and I were communicating about using this little red barn as a refuge or a safe haven for families and individuals that live in Davis County that could come down and feel safe and get some help and some support. Because what we found out, gentlemen, is that when we could tell our story, it freed us. It was liberating. It was cathartic. And so when I came out of rehab and went back to Red Barn, I thought to myself, what can we do with this place? And so I was a 12-step guy. 12 steps saved my life. So we set up just some chairs and we started having 12-step meetings there. And my goal was I wanted to have a meeting there every single night, so someone could walk in off the street, they could come in from any walk of life and feel safe and not feel judged. And all these meetings and all these workshops were centered around the family, were centered around substance use disorder, behavioral health issues. So not only did we have Alcoholics Anonymous, we had Smart Recovery, we had Addict to Athlete, we had Fit to Recover. And so we started this, and this started to take off and started to get some momentum. But I quickly realized that there needed to be more support. These people, a lot of them needed housing. A lot of them needed more structure. A lot of them needed to just learn basic life skills so they could become productive members of society. And so like any good drug addict that gets sober, I was about 2 years sober, because in 2010, I got clean off of heroin because I'm an ex-heroin addict. And in 2012 is when I got clean off of alcohol. About 2 years into my sobriety, I went back to school. I went back up to the University of Utah to get a social work degree because like any good drug addict, we're still selfish. Now we're going to go save the world, right? Because it still needs to be about us. So I went up and I started studying. I did an internship here at a local treatment center called The Haven, one of the best experiences of my life, a wonderful, wonderful facility. And as I was studying, there was a social work book that I was reading, and there was a little paragraph in there that talked about therapeutic communities, and it caught my attention. There's one in San Francisco. It talked about Delancey Street, minimum stay 2 years. We teach integrity, hard work, accountability. I mean, it just started the whole list, and like today, I'm getting the chills. I thought, ooh, I like this. This is what my life is all about. And so as soon as I read that little paragraph and walked out of class, I remember picking up the phone, calling my dad and saying, Dad, we got to go visit this place. This is amazing. So I took a couple board members and we went down to we went over to San Francisco and we did what's called an immersion training where we went and lived there at the facility for 3 days and learned everything that we could about the facility. And that's when the light bulb just went off. And I remember thinking to myself, this is the model that I want to bring back to Utah and do it in a farm setting. Teach hard work, discipline, everything around the farm setting that I grew up with that is fun now because now Maverick, my son, gets to go down to Red Barn and now participate in these activities with 50 students. That's what we call them at Red Barn. We have 50 residents there. So now he gets to go down and participate and work alongside these ex-drug addicts, ex-criminals, these individuals like myself that took a plea deal instead of going to prison. They're coming to Red Barn to learn the life skills necessary so that then they can go back and their restitution's paid in full to the state, and they now can go back and become productive members of society. So really, Red Barn started as this just, having a little farm and keeping the farm in Farmington, no pun intended. To now where it's a recovery center. It's a life skills residential facility that's licensed by the state of Utah. So now it's a 2-year program where men will come and live for a minimum stay of 2 years. 60% of those men that have been with us for 2 years are actually opting to stay a 3rd year, which means, and the way you get into Red Barn is you write us a letter. So you write us a letter from jail, or you can walk in off the street and do an interview. I'll go in and conduct the interview. There's certain requirements that we have, but essentially, if you pass that interview, then the real work starts. Then I go and work with the public defender, or my team does, with the judge, with APMP, and now we advocate for this individual, and lieu of going to prison, now they can come to Red Barn. So really, if you start looking at it from their perspective, 10 years in prison, 2 years at Red Barn. I'm not sure what it is at Red Barn, but I'll take, Red Barn. That sounds like a better deal. Then they come up and really then they start their journey. And it's a rigorous process. It's a recovery boot camp. We get up every single day at 5 a.m. If you get up at 5:01, we have a problem. You shave every single day. You say, yes, sir. You say, no, sir. We firmly believe that we can help these men recalibrate that moral compass. Because see, when I sit down with them, they're liars, cheats, and thieves. They know that, and they know that I know that. So we have a common baseline because, I'll say things like, your best thinking got you here. You're not doing too well. So let us help you out. And so as we go through that evaluation process and get them up to Red Barn and start them on that path, that's where the life reinvented that we talk about. That's where we talk about recalibrating that moral compass and doing the next right thing 730 days in a row. We firmly believe that a person can change. And now we're seeing those results as our men are not only completing the program, but are now going back and becoming good dads, good husbands. They're paying taxes. They're voting. They're becoming productive members of society. And the nice thing that I don't know if you guys know this, that it's free. It doesn't cost the individual or the family any money at all. We're self-sustaining through our own social enterprises. So these men get up every day and go to work. And then they come back home and they do their chores, just like a regular family. And then twice a week, I tell people, if you were paying to come to Red Barn, twice a week we have 2 groups, Monday night and Thursday night from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And that's where we sit down as a family and we confront each other on our shortcomings and where we're falling short. So it'll go something like this. Cory, I noticed today you fell short. You cut your corner on doing your chore. You didn't put the mop away. You didn't clean up after yourself. And, that behavior is lazy. I'm seeing that a lot out of you. And then you hear that, Cory, from about 15 other peers, and that lump in your throat starts to creep up, and you're going, dang. And when you go to bed at night, and you think to yourself, man, if I could just do what I'm supposed to do, if I could just do the next right thing, instead of being called out for falling short, then you start becoming validated for your actions and your behaviors. Well, you have to remember, we're dope fiends. That integrity drug feels really, really good. So when I follow through with something and then I get an attaboy, I want more of that. I want more of that. And now I'm on a winning team. So for myself and a lot of these students, this is the first time they've been on a winning team. I mean, I don't want to make an excuse for these guys. And honestly, I wish I had a better excuse for being a drug addict. But a lot of these men in my program, they're a product of their environment, which means the first time they did drugs, mom loaded the rig and shoved the needle in their arm at 12 years old. So as you grow up in a family like that, I mean, you're pretty well doomed. You don't have the best coping skills. Yeah. And so when they come to Red Barn, we have to break all that down and help them understand what it is to be honest, what it is to have integrity, what is the definition of love. Because a lot of times when I go into the jail and prison, I ask these guys, because a lot of them have kids, do you love your kids? What do you think they say? Oh yeah, of course I love my kids. Really? Do you love them more than drugs? Yeah. Oh, really? Because would you be here right now if you cared about your kids more than drugs and the crime and the alcohol and all your shenanigans? So don't lie to me. I don't have that coming. Don't pull that over on me. And so that's the way our program works, is you got someone like myself that's been in the trenches, that's been there, done that, and now can help provide the structure and the leadership to help these guys get back on their feet. There's no secret to what we do. If you want what I have, just do what I do, is what I tell these guys. So it's a process.
Sounds like a pretty, it sounds like it's a very in-your-face program, which I think probably is the language that most of these guys speak. Mm-hmm. Can we transfer this knowledge that you've learned from helping correct incorrect behaviors to something that our listeners could take from this as they maybe see behaviors in their kids that they don't necessarily want? How do you lovingly but forcefully approach somebody like a teenager whose behavior is kind of slipping with honesty, but still stay, you're not friends with your kids first. You're their parent first. And I think that's maybe one lesson right off the top. But talk to us about some of the language that you would use to talk to a kid who, you call them out on their stuff.
That's a great question, because as I'm thinking as you're talking, a lot. So the average age of our student at Red Barn is 32 years old. However, most of us, when we start using drugs and alcohol at a younger age, that stunts our growth and definitely our emotional capacity and, well-being. And so our ability to process and work through and problem solving, it's been an interesting experience working with these men, because, my 50-year-olds a lot of times will act like 18-year-olds. So to answer your question, the way that we do it and the way that we've seen it become successful at Red Barn is hitting it head on with these guys, just calling it as it is. You fell short. Again, it's like when I addressed Cory earlier, I'm not attacking you as a person. I'm attacking the behavior. But we hit it head on. We call it as it is. We're kind, but we're firm. That's why, if people were to say, how would you describe Red Barn? I want to be able to say that there's a lot of love there, but I think the right word is, when you come there, we will be kind to you. You'll be treated with respect, but we will be firm. We are structured. And what I've seen, Kirk, as a result, my men really respond to that well, because we're not sugarcoating. There's a definite line in the sand. For example, if you get up 5 minutes late in the morning at 5:05, you have 2 hours of dishes, community service. If you do it again, then you'll have 4 hours. You do it again, you have 8. So you can see where I'm going with this. Pretty soon you think to yourself, man, all I got to do is get up 5 minutes earlier, and instead of getting dishes, I'm going to get an attaboy. I mean, that's pretty cool. I can do that. So that positive reinforcement, but it has to stay consistent. And I don't have a lot of experience with teenagers because I only have a 3-year-old, but I do have 50 men at the farm that a lot of times do act like teenagers. But the more that I can be just direct with them and upfront with them and clearly define what their role is, and this is what I expect out of you, it's been a much healthier interaction. And to your point, I tell these guys when I pick them up from jail, if I'm not your friend, if you like me, I am not doing my job. Because you're coming here because we've got to change your behaviors. You're coming here because your life is a disaster. I'm not validating. You won the lottery because you get to come up here now to change your life, but this will be the toughest thing you ever do.
It sounds like you've created the culture to have the conversation. Mm-hmm. Without the culture, the conversation is, hey, forget you, man. I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. Right. But because you've created the culture, and we talk about that quite a bit on the podcast of how much effort are we putting into creating a family culture so that we can have the important conversations about drugs, alcohol, pornography, mm-hmm. things that our kids are all dealing with, social media and things like that. And if we try to have those conversations without the culture and without the relationship first, and the expectations of, hey, we're going to have these conversations and we're going to have to talk about it. I think that's probably the magic that you've got there is you set the expectations right up front that, hey, we have a culture here. And if you're going to come here, you're going to be a part of that culture.
Right.
You know, the things you've gone through, Mike, have been hard and have shaped who you are. They're going to make you a better dad. That's one of the cool things I'm hearing right now. You're going to raise Maverick differently than you would have. Mm-hmm. That's going to be a great blessing, I have a feeling, because you do know how to teach these life lessons to people. You do know how to teach them integrity and hard work and dedication, and there's consequences to your actions. So I think that's going to be fantastic. Maybe not something you've even thought of, but mm-hmm. it is going to be a huge benefit to your family.
Right, right.
I want you to talk to two people. Talk to the parent who is having issues with a son or daughter who's addicted, and what advice would you give the parent? And then 2, talk to that person who hasn't yet got help, who hasn't yet got off the treadmill of addiction. Talk to each one of those, and what advice would you give them?
That's good. That's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there, Cory. The family program at Red Barn, we just launched 2 months ago. And I feel so strongly about that program because the language that we're teaching our students at Red Barn, it's not just setting boundaries, but it's how you set the boundaries and what the expectation is around that. What's difficult with family members, and you guys know this, and I'll tell families this right now, your job is not to save your family. That's my job. Your job is to work with my family because of family dynamics, right? It's like we say, well, our families know how to push our buttons, right? Because they're the ones who installed them. So my job is to work with your family, Cory, if your family's struggling, because I can say the exact same thing you're saying, but it's going to be received differently. And that's a known fact. So the first thing I would encourage families to do is look for outside help. Don't try to fix your family. There's some wonderful resources here in our community, and I'm happy to leave those at the end of the podcast. But once a week, every Sunday, and this is open to the community, anyone that's listening to this podcast is welcome to come join us up in Farmington at Red Barn. We use a textbook that's called Getting Your Loved One Sober. I love it because it's based on motivational interviewing. It's intrinsically motivating the individual to get the help that they need. That's what my dad did with me that third time when we sat down. It was now my idea. Now I had to own it. Now this book that we have, the subtitle is Alternatives to Pleading, Nagging, and Ultimatums, which is perfect because those don't work. At least they don't have the best success rates. So the first thing that I would encourage families to do is there are resources. Reach out to us at Red Barn, reach out to your local, we've got a behavioral health organization up in Davis County that's amazing. There's some things that the state is doing right now that are really, really cool. So there are resources out there. I think the biggest obstacle, Cory, is the stigma that's tied to it. Because I'll meet with families all the time and I'll encourage them and I'll give them resources, But I think there's a guilt that's tied to it. There's a shame. They personalize it. They make it about them. They feel responsible for their kids or family members. So the more we can talk about it and communicate it and share it, because you guys know, when you meet me, you know I'm a recovering addict. I mean, I broadcast it to the whole world. Sometimes I like the shock factor of saying, yeah, I'm a junkie or I'm an ex-heroin addict. And people are like, wait, you? That's me. But you can bounce back. There's hope. There is a solution. There is a remedy to this. And that's what we found up at Red Barn. So that's what I would say to the parents, is the same thing you're saying to me. Don't be so hard on yourself. You don't have the answers. Even if you did, your family member's not going to receive those from you. But there are some great workshops and great groups that are out there. Now, for the individual that's still struggling, and I have friends that are out there that are still struggling, it's tough. It's a tough job to be a full-time drug addict, to be a liar, cheat, and thief, and to have to keep your stories. And, you know, it's a real interesting dichotomy, or I don't know if it's ironic, but, you know, the last time I remember when I was arrested and found out, it was this sense of relief, like, okay, the cops are doing for me, or my family's doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. And we're always kind of in limbo there as an active drug addict. We want to get found out, but we don't. And so it's this vicious cycle, and we destroy, you know, anyone that comes near us. And so for the drug addict that's still out there, you know, one question, you know, how's that working out for you? It sucks. It's the worst. I mean, I think about my days when I was actively using, and I would drink all the alcohol that I had in my house. I'd take as many pills as I could, thinking that I wouldn't wake up in the morning, and then I would, and then I was pissed. But I was too big of a wimp to take my own life, and I just kept, just trudging. It was just miserable. And so, unfortunately, pain being the ultimate motivator for a drug addict, when we get enough pain, we will change. And this idea of allowing our family members to fall or hit that proverbial rock bottom, which I hate using that word, because rock bottom for my little brother was death. You know, I don't think we have to die to prove a point. As long as there's life, there's hope. I firmly believe that, because we experience that every day up at Red Barn. But to the drug addict that's out there using, he or she, don't ever give up. Don't ever give up. Because if I can get sober and I can do what I'm doing today, anyone can do it.
Do you think a friend could help? I'm thinking to myself, like, we've been friends before and after your addiction.
Yeah.
And I would do anything for you. You know, I think the world of you, and always have, as you well know.
Thank you.
But is there anything a friend could do in that situation that a family member might not be able to do? Because again, it's, you know, I'm a friend. I'm not a dad. I'm a friend. I'm not a mom or a brother. What would you give advice to friends? Because I'm thinking to myself, what could I have done different?
Yeah. You know, and I think a lot of times at least I do, I'll contemplate on that. You know, what could I have done different with my little brother? Or what could I have done different with these students that, you know, this guy split? Did I say something that that kind of tipped him over? I think the best advice that I could give from personal experience is just make sure that those people know you're available. Make sure they know you're not judging them. Make sure you know that you're just going to, hey, I'm here for you no matter what. Because I call it this window of willingness. And addicts and, you know, people with these unhealthy behaviors will go through that, where they get to that desperation. I call it the gift of, because it's almost like it starts with this curiosity. It's like, I see someone, man, that guy's sober, and I know he was a disaster. What's he doing? You know, it's kind of this gift of curiosity. And then, you know, I'm so desperate that I'm willing to do anything, you know? And so if I know that there's someone that's available, that's not going to judge me, that is going to be there just to listen, it's not manipulation or coercion. It's get them close to you. And then the next step is you got to get them into detox immediately. You don't need to talk about the future or the next 30-day treatment center. Where are they going to go? We got to get them stabilized is where we've got to go. And I've done this, I don't want to say thousands of times, but hundreds of times. And there's this window there. And once it closes and that person digs in, then you may not be able to get the help that they need. But just being available, checking in. You have your gut tell you, hey, I got to check in with this guy or with this gal. Do it with a text message, with a phone call, but follow your gut. That's what I do. And I just make sure that I stay available and I plant those seeds. Even when I go into the jail and prison, if I interview someone and I feel like they may not be ready to come to Red Barn, I will definitely plant a seed. And what's happened is, you know, a year or two later, you know, maybe they repeat offend and, you know, I was kind to them and I planted a seed that they were curious about living this type of a lifestyle. And then ultimately they come up to Red Barn and change their life. So being available is the key component.
A friend of mine just passed me on the freeway on the way down here. And he said, "Hey, I just passed you. I'm on your left, about 3 cars in front of you. How you doing?" Right? He could have just completely said, "Hey, that was Kirk. Cool." But he picked up the phone and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And we talked about stuff that our family's struggling with, what he's doing. And it was just that reach out. And he said, "You just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. And if anything was happening in my life, I know I've got a friend there." Right. And that's exactly what I think we've enabled ourselves to live apart from each other. We've enabled us as a society to live isolated lives, and everything, all the social interaction that we have is through our phones.
Yeah.
And to just pick up the phone and send a text message, make a phone call and say, "Hey, how you doing?" Especially if you know it's somebody who's struggling with something like that. It's a huge deal.
Yeah. Well, we believe if you would have asked me 5 years ago, if there was a solution or a remedy to these unhealthy lifestyles that we work on up at Red Barn, I would have said, I don't think so. I think this is, you know, just something you're going to deal with the rest of your life. But today I believe there's a solution and a remedy, and that's connection. If we can stay connected to each other, because I think as a socially alone. So it's like we can be out in Starbucks with everyone, but headphones in and don't talk to me, leave me alone. And that's accepted. And I think that's wrong, because we've got to be able to make eye contact. We got to touch. We got to feel all those things that we've kind of lost sight of during the pandemic, and trying to reconnect. This is so important. And I tell my students up at Red Barn, you stay connected, you will live happy, joyous, and free. But the moment you start isolating, the moment you think that you've got things under control and got it figured out, guys like us, we end up dead or locked up again. So it is important, the connection piece, and especially with family. That's why I tell people all the time, we don't have a drug problem. We have a family problem. We have a gentleman problem. If we could do a better job, and this is what I'm trying to do with Maverick, and I love your lists and some of the things that you talked about before the podcast, but if we can teach those things at home and stay connected with those principles and live those and practice those together, the drug problem, the alcohol problem, that takes care of itself without even addressing it. Because you guys may not even know this. You can't talk about drugs and alcohol at Red Barn. You can't talk about your past at Red Barn. When you come to Red Barn, you have a clean slate. We don't believe you have a drug or alcohol problem. We believe you have an integrity problem. We believe you're a liar, cheat, and thief. Because you guys, before I didn't have my first drink until I was a junior in high school. Well, I was a liar, cheat, and thief way before that. I was cheating in school because I got paid for my A's, and so I was going to do anything to get an A on my report card, and I got 4 O's. Always. And then when all that guilt and shame started to set in, and you drink a little something or smoke a little something, and that goes away, and you start making that connection, and then before you know it, you've developed an unhealthy behavior. So I firmly believe a lot of this would be remedied if we can just deal with it at home.
So talk to us, Mike, about, and I don't know that you've written this down of what you're going to teach Maverick, right? Or maybe you have a pretty good overview of kind of the syllabus of life now that you've had, that you've helped hundreds of people with figuring out how to be the opposite of a lying, thieving, whatever, right? So talk to us about what you think some of the key components are, or maybe some of the key components you want to make sure that Maverick has. Like, man, if he can have these 4 or 5 or 6 things in his core, in who he is,
right,
then he's going to be okay. Like, everything's probably going to work out okay. What would those be in your mind?
You know, that a lot comes to mind, Cory, when you ask that question. Something, and I'll get to what I think is the most important component at the end. I want to teach Maverick to be passionate about life. I grew up in a family where there were certain expectations. There were certain things you were going to do. I don't want to say I've gone completely swung the pendulum the other way, but I kind of have. You know, if Mav wants to go to school, great. If he wants to go to grad school, if he wants to be a dancer, I mean, my life was so planned out for me that I'm not going to manage it the same way with him. I want him to, be kind. I want him to be understanding. I want him to have, all the wonderful characteristics of being a gentleman, but ultimately integrity. Number one, it has to be, because I teach my students, and I firmly believe if you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. So for me, if I could teach that kid to be to be an integral individual, that would be the ultimate goal for me.
I like it. It does touch everything else, doesn't it? I mean, if you're working hard or not. And if you're giving your all. Mm-hmm. And typically if you're as kind as you can be or not, right? And so integrity does touch everything. I haven't thought of it that way before, but it really does.
Because see, if I'm a kind person and a loving person, but you can't count on me. I'm not, my word doesn't mean anything. It's just, that's what I teach these guys at Red Barn is the accountability, the responsibility. When you say something, I believe a gentleman is good, makes good on their word, no matter what. And so if I can teach that and instill that, or at least he understands that that's important to his dad, then I've done my job, because, I haven't lived my life with integrity. I mean, I would honestly say, I'm insecure and I have my own, shortcomings, but I'm eliciting, feedback from my wife. I think it was a couple years ago, for our anniversary. I said, what's the best part about being married to me? And she looked at me and she said, that I can trust you. That's a big deal for me. That's because awesome. 35, for a long time, you couldn't trust me. And now I'm trustworthy. And that's the best compliment that anyone could pay me.
That's cool.
Talk to us about receiving feedback from your wife. Has she taught you anything about raising Maverick? And, most of us, if we're smart, we listen to the advice of our wives. Talk to us about maybe a time that she's given you some advice that you took to heart.
Yeah, Kirk. I probably need to take a page out of your book and start journaling and taking some notes, because my wife is, she's very knowledgeable. She's a homemaker. She has a knack for it. And right now we're in the middle of transitioning Maverick from his crib to his bed, and we're working on the potty training thing as well. So there's a few things that are going on at my house right now, but he's a COVID kid. So my heart goes out to him, because, he's used to people having masks on. He's used to, it's weird. We have a friend who comes over to our house once a week to kind of help us, and he makes her wear her mask. Her name's Alicia, and he says, Alicia, put your mask on, And so he's a COVID kid. He's an only child, and I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but man, I'm excited to get him out and start getting more social. But yeah, he's been throwing these tantrums lately, and I see myself, I'm a little bigger. I'm the provider, I'm the caretaker. And so I'm the disciplinarian. I'm the self-appointed disciplinarian at the house. So the last couple of tantrums, I just, I've kind of gone with it and not said a whole lot until finally I lost my cool. And my wife was right there, and I'm a big, strong guy, and I picked Maverick up and I set him down a little bit too hard, and he started crying, and I knew that I was in the wrong, and I started crying. My wife started crying. It was a mess. And I looked at her, and I just remember saying, what do you want me to do? Help me here, coach me. And she just said, you need to be kind. He's a little boy. He's 3 years old. And I remember, because the next day I came back and she had a couple of books out, and she had highlighted different parts of the books about, 3-year-olds that have tantrums and how they only understand every fifth word and how they can't communicate, and every problem's a major problem. And so here I am reading this, and, I'm a little bit sad. I'm a little bit just feeling like I fell short. And, I think the best part of it is that, my wife she's so steady and she's so understanding and she's so kind. And she just put her arm around me and she said, we'll do better. Let's do better together. And so it's really, Kirk, it's so difficult for me because I've got 50 grown men that I can go down and I can discipline and I can draw a definite line and set a definite boundary. And this is the expectation. But when it comes to my own son, I struggle. I shared that with my dad the other day. He laughed. He thought it was great. He says, now you're starting to get it. And I think that's what life does. Either we have perspective or life will give us perspective. And that's the rounding out. That's the softening. That's what's knocking off the rough edges off of me right now is being a dad. And I love it. I love it.
It is the greatest. We have all been there. I still sometimes get upset and lose my cool. In fact, we've talked about this many times on the podcast. That's kind of been one of the things that I've had to work on the entire time I've been a father. And then quite frankly, sometimes it gets harder when they're teenagers. So
I know. Do I want a 3-year-old tantrum or an 18-year-old tantrum?
When they're taller than you, it's different.
One of the best advice I ever got was Brady Murray, who was on the podcast. And just quickly, this was a daughter that I was having issue with. She was 12, 13 at the time. And he goes, you just need to ask yourself how you'd like her future husband to treat her. Would you want him to lose his cool?
Yeah.
Would you want him not to be kind? And my wife did the same thing after I told her that story with our little boy. She goes, yeah, I need to make sure that I treat Mac, my son, like I would want his future wife to treat him. And it was great perspective for me. And it kind of helped me be more careful about getting a little bit angry too fast. It kind of makes you go, yeah, how do I want them to see that relationship? Right. So for what it's worth, that helped me.
Thank you. Yeah, Thank you for sharing that.
And we have all been there, and I'll share a short one. One time I grabbed my son who was, I don't even remember what we were arguing about, or like he talked back or something. And I grabbed him by the arm and I moved him too hard. And I thought about it when you said you set Maverick down and you realized it was too hard. Well, I grabbed his arm and it knocked him over. And I turned and I looked. And my daughter, who saw it, and it was inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And the look on her face, to me, was the worst punishment.
Yeah. I can imagine.
And it was one of those times that you go, okay, step back, count to 10, apologize, move on. And not only did I need to apologize to my son, which I did. I went into his room and apologized. But then I had to go apologize to his sister and say, what I did was inappropriate. I had lost my cool. I didn't realize how big I was, how strong I was. I didn't mean to do what I did, but I did it, and I'm sorry. And so I don't think that you're alone. I think it's probably happened to most all of us. And it's hard to say, dude, what I just did, like if you looked at it from the outside, you would come up to me in the grocery store and tell me not to do that to my kid. But in the house, sometimes it happens and you've got to stop yourself and then you've got to correct it. And don't let that become who you are. And so Maverick's got some good, solid example to follow in his home. Just after meeting you for just the podcast here, I'm impressed with the type of guy that you are, and somebody who's overcome something that a lot of people don't. And it's started with prescription drugs, and a lot of it's gone to heroin, and then people find other ways to cope, and it swallows a lot of us. So if you're struggling with addiction, if you're struggling with drug and alcohol dependency, tell us where you can go, because a lot of the people you deal with are already in jail, right? If you're not in jail yet, what's your resource? Where do you go if you don't feel like you have anybody that you can talk to?
Well, first and foremost, you can reach out to us. Our website is redbarnfarms.org, and we have a lot of resources that are on there. And so anyone can call us. I would say 90% of the individuals that think they want to come to Red Barn, I don't bring them into Red Barn because they're not appropriate. So we call it a warm handoff. We're really good, and I'm okay with that. I just want the individuals to get the help that they need. So they can always contact us, and then we have relationships with all the different treatment centers. We actually have, this state of Utah has some amazing facilities here in Utah. That's why people come from all over the world for treatment here in Utah. So reach out to us. Our website is redbarnfarms.org, and we would be happy to help facilitate that. And we do tours. We do daily tours at the farm. So individuals can come up, they can get, our students will conduct the tours, they share their stories. It's a great connection piece between public and then maybe it's a family member that's struggling that just needs to come up and take a tour, and bringing them into that world and seeing that, okay, there is hope for me. There is an option. There are resources that are out there, because we do. So reach out to us at Red Barn, and we would be happy to help put people in touch with the appropriate resource.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, Mike, for lack of a better word, I couldn't be more proud of you. What you've done with your life and the person that you are. Maverick's going to benefit from that. It's really cool. We ask all of our guests a question at the end, and we ask them, what do they feel a gentleman is? So I'll ask you, what would be your definition of a gentleman?
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me here today. Thank you, Nick. Cory, I do. I love you. Look up to you greatly. What a wonderful podcast, and what a wonderful service that you guys are providing for our community. A gentleman, I would say there's 3 ingredients for me. And what I'm trying to teach my students at Red Barn, and also my son Maverick, is first and foremost to be kind. I believe it's in the word, a gentle man. I believe it's someone that's kind. I believe it's also someone that is full of gratitude, that is grateful and exudes that to where the graciousness and gratitude is actually palpable. And then I think the third and the most important component is integrity. You have to have integrity. As men, when we make a commitment, we have to fulfill that commitment, whether it's to our spouse, our significant other, our kids, our friends, our business partners, our relationships. We have to fulfill and make good on our commitments. That would be my definition of a gentleman.
Awesome. That was one of the first words that I taught my boys when we started doing the Gentleman Project, was a gentleman has integrity. And it's different. It's a longer conversation than just doing what you say you're going to do. Mm-hmm. It encompasses a lot. Yeah. So have those conversations with your kids. Hey, thank you for joining us, Mike. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. And hopefully you've enjoyed the podcast today. Thanks for spending the time to listen to the podcast. Thanks for interacting with us and sharing it with people that you love. If you think this episode would help somebody that you love who may be addicted to drugs, alcohol, or anything else in their life that's unhealthy, share the episode with them in love and kindness. Reach out to them and do it in a way with connection, like genuine, loving connection. And I think this episode will probably help a lot of people. So thank you for that. Like us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, anywhere that you consume your social media. We'd love to connect with you, and we'll throw up some sound bites and some quotes. There were plenty of them in this podcast. So thanks for joining us on the Gentleman Project podcast. I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore. Thanks, everybody.